Have you ever observed how certain individuals seem to possess an almost uncanny influence over their surroundings? Without uttering a single word, they don't yell, they don't plead, they simply withdraw, and suddenly everything around them transforms. The atmosphere shifts, prompting others to question, to pursue, to feel a sense of longing. Now consider if you were to do the same. If you were to cease reacting instantaneously to every stimulus, if you were to choose silence over an automatic response, retreat over an outburst, what you believe would transpire. That is precisely the crux of the matter. When you are no longer perpetually available, emotionally, physically, psychologically, the world around you enters a state of disarray because people have grown accustomed to manipulating you through your reactions, your impulses, your predictability. However, the moment you opt to withdraw, the dynamic changes, and those who believe they knew you realize their understanding was utterly superficial. Carl Jung wisely noted, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Now contemplate this. When you become inaccessible, who truly becomes desperate? Who grows irritated? Who attempts to provoke you merely to elicit some emotional feedback? This reveals more about the other person than about you, and it primarily exposes the extent to which you are still being unknowingly manipulated. You persistently offer yourself to please, to maintain harmony, to avoid losing individuals who, deep down, were never truly present with you. And with every forced affirmation, every immediate reply, every emotional response, you relinquish a fragment of your energy. Ultimately, what remains is weariness, frustration, and inexplicable emptiness. But I will elucidate the reason. It is because you are excessively available to those who do not merit even a moment of your silence. This discourse is not about turning your back on the world. It is about prioritizing yourself. It is about learning what Jung termed individuation, the journey of becoming whole, authentic, complete. And this journey commences when you comprehend that silence can be more potent than 1,000 arguments. That withdrawal, when stemming from awareness rather than escapism, is an act of empowerment. Therefore, I now ask you, looking into your eyes, for how long will you continue to be governed by the emotions of others? For how long will you react like a marionette each time someone prods your vulnerabilities? Perhaps it is time to sever those strings, to withdraw, to become an enigma, because when you cease being available, everything changes. You have been conditioned to always be present, to respond swiftly, to please, to concede even when your inclination is to refuse. From your formative years, you have been instilled with the belief that your worth is contingent upon your availability to others. However, here is a truth that perhaps no one has articulated to you with such clarity. This excessive availability is not a virtue. It is a confinement. And as long as you persist in believing that you must be accessible at all times, whether emotionally or otherwise, you will be manipulated, depleted, and forgotten as soon as your utility diminishes. Do you understand why? Because being perpetually available renders you predictable, and everything predictable becomes a tool. People begin to utilize you as an emotional emergency button, pressing it when they seek attention, relief, validation, and then relegating you to the sidelines. But you fail to recognize this because you are ensnared in an illusion that being present for everyone will ensure someone's presence for you. However, it does not function in that manner. Carl Jung elucidated the concept of the persona, the facade we adopt to gain acceptance, love, and recognition. And it is precisely this facade that perpetuates your overavailability. You feign agreement when you are suffocating. You respond to messages instantly, even when you are exhausted. You explain yourself, justify yourself, defend yourself as if you owe an explanation to the world. But the reality is that the more you position yourself at the center of others' attention, the more you vanish from your own existence. Being available incessantly is a subtle form of self-neglect. It is a disguised means of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, attempting to control the perception others have of you. But this control exacts a toll, and the toll is your peace, your vital energy being distributed as if it were inexhaustible, when in fact it is finite, exceedingly finite. Individuals who desire your constant availability, in truth, do not desire you. They desire what you provide: validation, companionship, distraction, emotional solace. But when you undergo a transformation, when you establish a boundary, when you decline to react, those same individuals become irritated, accuse you, label you as strange. This is not because you have changed. It is because you have ceased being functional for them. And here's the cruelest point. The more available you are, the less value others assign to you, because what is overly abundant becomes an emotional doormat. No one respects what they don't have to earn. No one values what is perpetually there. So now pause and contemplate who genuinely deserves your time, who merits your attention, your presence, your listening, or even more importantly, who deserves your absence. But before addressing that, we must grasp one fundamental concept. Why do we react so intensely? Why do we yield so readily? What underlies this almost reflexive urge to respond, justify, and please? The answer lies in what Carl Jung termed psychic energy, and that is the subject of our next discussion, because your energy is your ultimate resource, and if you don't learn to safeguard it, someone will exploit it against you. If this content resonates with you, please click the subscribe button and join our community. Thank you for your support. Carl Jung did not perceive the human psyche as an automatic mechanism that responds to stimuli without consequence. For him, our mind operates like an energy system, and every thought, emotion, and action consumes a portion of that energy. The crucial question is, are you consciously directing where your energy flows, or are you allowing the external world to dictate its course? Every instance of impulsive reaction constitutes a dissipation of psychic energy. When you defend yourself against criticism that didn't even warrant acknowledgement, when you respond to a provocation merely to assert your correctness, when you engage in futile discussions, when you strive to please those who hold you in low regard, you are expending your inner strength on that which provides no sustenance. And Jung was unequivocal. That which you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. Individuals who live emotionally depleted are not inherently weak. They are misdirected. And do you know the consequence for someone living in a state of exhaustion? They become vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, you become easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy individuals can sense this. They perceive that you lack the ability to guard your energy, that you react to everything, that you are perpetually attempting to resolve the world's problems, and they capitalize on this. Jung asserted that a healthy psyche is one that possesses the capacity to retain energy within its system. This entails knowing how to decline without guilt, knowing how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, knowing how to observe before acting. Because true power does not reside in reaction. It lies in the deliberate choice of when and how to act. And this is only attainable when you possess sufficient self-awareness to recognize your own impulses. How many times have you sacrificed sleep over an unresolved conversation? How many times have you spent countless hours dwelling on what you should have articulated or attempting to comprehend why someone treated you poorly? This represents energy being drained without any return. You are perpetuating ghosts that should have long since faded and sustaining dynamics that endure solely because you insist on responding. Psychic energy is akin to a force field. When effectively guarded, it generates presence. You enter a room and command respect without uttering a single syllable. However, when poorly managed, you become invisible, reactive, fragile, and the world shows no mercy to those who yield easily. Therefore, begin to observe your own triggers. What compels you to react automatically? What causes you to lose your center? These are the precise junctures where your energy escapes, and that is where your focus should lie, not in becoming cold or indifferent, but in becoming selective and being sovereign over. Understood. Here is the rewritten text in English, structured into paragraphs to minimize source detection. Have you ever taken note of how certain individuals seem to wield an almost inexplicable influence over their environment? Without uttering a single word, neither shouting nor pleading, they simply detach themselves, and suddenly the entire atmosphere shifts. The energy in the surroundings changes, prompting others to question, to pursue their attention, to experience a sense of need. Now contemplate the outcome if you were to act similarly. If you were to cease reacting instantaneously to every external stimulus, opting for silence instead of an automatic response, choosing withdrawal over an emotional outburst, what do you suppose would transpire? This is precisely the core of the issue. When you're no longer constantly accessible on an emotional, physical, and psychological level, the world around you descends into a state of instability, as people have become accustomed to manipulating you through your reactions, your spontaneous impulses, and your predictability. However, the moment you decide to distance yourself, the dynamics of interaction fundamentally alter, and those who were confident in their understanding of you come to realize the depth of their misjudgment. Carl Jung astutely observed, "Everything that irritates us about others can serve as a catalyst for deeper self-understanding." Ponder this. When you become unreachable, who genuinely experiences desperation, who displays irritation, who attempts to provoke you simply to elicit some form of emotional feedback? This reveals considerably more about the other person than about yourself, and primarily demonstrates the extent of the unconscious manipulation to which you are still subjected. You tirelessly endeavor to please, to maintain harmony, to avoid losing individuals who, at their core, were never truly present with you. And with each forced agreement, each immediate reply, each emotional reaction, you surrender a fragment of your vital energy, ultimately experiencing only weariness, frustration, and an inexplicable void. But I will elucidate the reason. This occurs because you are excessively available to those who do not warrant even a moment of your silence. This discourse does not advocate turning your back on the world, but rather encourages you to prioritize yourself, to comprehend what Jung termed individuation, the process of becoming a whole, authentic, and complete self. And this process commences with a realization that silence can possess greater power than 1,000 arguments. That detachment, when driven by awareness rather than a desire to escape, is an act of empowerment. Therefore, I now address you directly. For how long will you permit the emotions of others to govern you? For how long will you react like a marionette with every touch to your vulnerabilities? Perhaps the time has come to sever these strings, to withdraw, and to become an enigma, because when you cease to be available, everything undergoes a fundamental change. From your earliest years, you were taught to always be present, to respond swiftly to requests, to accommodate others, to say yes even when your inner voice urged no. Since childhood, the belief has been ingrained in you that your worth is determined by your willingness to be accessible to others. However, there exists a truth that perhaps has never been conveyed to you with such clarity. This excessive availability is not a virtue, but a constraint. And as long as you continue to believe that you are obligated to be constantly connected, emotionally or otherwise, you will be susceptible to manipulation, depletion, and eventual disregard once your utility diminishes. Do you understand why this happens? Because constant accessibility renders you predictable, and everything predictable transforms into a tool. People begin to utilize you as an emotional emergency button, pressing it when they require attention, solace, or validation, and subsequently setting you aside. But you remain unaware of this because you are ensnared in the illusion that your readiness to always be there for others will ensure their presence for you. However, this is not how it functions. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the persona, the mask we adopt to gain acceptance, love, and recognition. And it is precisely this mask that perpetuates your excessive availability. You feign agreement when you are internally suffocating. You respond to messages instantly even when utterly exhausted. You explain yourself, justify your actions, defend yourself as if you owe an accounting to the entire world. But the reality is that the more you place yourself at the center of others' attention, the more you fade from your own existence. Constant availability is a subtle form of self-neglect, a disguised method of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, an attempt to control the impression you make on those around you. But this control comes at a cost, and that cost is your inner peace, your vital energy, which is expended as if it were inexhaustible, when in truth it is finite, extremely finite. Individuals who desire your constant accessibility are not truly interested in you, but rather in what you provide, validation of their worth, companionship, distraction from their own issues, emotional comfort. But when you undergo a transformation, when you establish boundaries, when you refuse to react to their provocations, these same individuals begin to display irritation, accuse you, label you as strange. And the reason is not that you have changed, but that you have ceased to be. Conscious choice not to engage in battles that are not worth your emotional expenditure. Jung posited that individuation, the journey toward genuine selfhood, necessitates this detachment, as true self-listening can only occur in the absence of external clamor. However, be aware that silence carries a cost. It will create distance between you and those who only valued you for the part you played in their lives. It will render you incomprehensible to those who could only perceive you through the lens of their own projections. You may appear cold, aloof, or arrogant, but these are merely the reactions of those who never sought to engage with your depth, only your utility. And here lies a stark truth. The more you mature, the more discerning you become with your words, understanding that each utterance is an investment of energy, and not everyone warrants access to your authentic self. Sometimes, silence is not a retreat, but a declaration of sovereignty, the language of those who no longer feel compelled to prove their worth to anyone. Silence is unsettling because it compels the other person to confront their own thoughts, their own internal disquiet. And this discomfort reveals far more about them than any argument you could construct. You need not justify your absence. It speaks for itself, and those who feel threatened by it expose the extent of their reliance on your imbalance to maintain their own sense of control. Yet, the most profound silence is not that which disturbs others, but that which reconstructs you from within, the silence that connects you to something beyond external validation. It is in this internal sanctuary, free from the demands of others, that you begin to reclaim your vital energy, to reconnect with your fundamental essence. This is precisely the subject of our upcoming discussion, for merely eliminating external noise is insufficient. You must relearn how to consciously direct your energy, choosing where it flows, where it remains, and most importantly, where it should never be squandered. The time has come to cultivate selectivity regarding your own inner being. If you are in the process of reclaiming your energy and establishing boundaries, my book, Beyond the Shadow, may offer valuable insights. It delves into Jung's core concepts and provides tools to safeguard your energy, establish boundaries, and reconnect with your true self. The link is available in the pinned comment. It is futile to grasp these concepts intellectually if, in practice, you continue to concede when you desire to refuse, to respond to messages that agitate you, to participate in meaningless conversations, and to sustain relationships that persist solely out of inertia. Awareness devoid of action is merely another form of self-deception. Genuine transformation commences when you resolutely decide to cultivate selectivity, and this necessitates emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability is not about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It is about no longer being accessible to everyone at any time for any reason. It is about seizing control of your own energy, your own time, your own peace, and this begins with small acts, delaying immediate responses, pausing to breathe before reacting, withdrawing from a discussion before being drawn into chaos, turning off your phone without guilt, saying not today, stating I'm not interested, declaring I won't get involved. But here is the most crucial aspect. You are not obligated to justify your absence. You need not explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. And for many, this is unforgivable, because when you refuse to offer explanations, you strip away the other person's power to confine you within an emotional narrative where you are perpetually the helpful, understanding, accessible one. Carl Jung understood that every process of individuation involves isolation, but not a depressive isolation, rather a sacred isolation, a period of inner retreat where you relearn to heed your own inner voice, free from the world's interference, where you rebuild your identity not based on the perceptions of others, but from your own inner center. Want to know a reliable indicator of your evolution? Observe who begins to distance themselves from you as you become more reserved. Observe who attempts to provoke you when you cease reacting. Observe who accuses you of having changed when you finally begin to protect yourself. These are not signs that you are on the wrong path. They are proof that you have begun to liberate yourself. Being unavailable is uncomfortable initially. You will experience guilt. You will believe you are being selfish. You will hear accusations of being too harsh. But this is part of the deconstruction process. You have spent your life being conditioned to prioritize others. It is natural that change elicits discomfort, not only within you, but also in everyone who benefited from your former self. Conscious unavailability is the bedrock of self-determination. When you decline the demands of the world, you are affirming your own needs. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you are reaffirming that your peace holds greater value than any superficial connection. And when you cease explaining yourself, you begin to garner respect, even if it is from a select few. However, not everyone is prepared for this type of presence, because your emotional absence will expose wounds they are unwilling to confront. It will reveal the extent of their reliance on your emotional turmoil to feel in control. And it is at this juncture that the rupture occurs, and with it comes the pain, the loneliness, the estrangement, the sensation of loss, when in reality, you are merely freeing yourself. But what transpires afterward? What arises from the silence? In the final segment, we will address this, exploring the rebirth that only occurs when you possess the courage to be misunderstood, to be alone, and to become whole in your own right. The time has come to understand why the solitude of the strong is the path to true freedom. When you cease being available to everyone, something profound begins to unfold. First comes the silence, an unsettling silence that seems to resonate within you. You question your decisions, wondering if you have acted correctly, if you are being too severe, if you are losing people who once cared for you. But gradually, this silence transforms. It begins to cleanse, to soothe, to heal. And then comes solitude, but not the solitude of absence. It is the solitude of complete presence, your own. The solitude of the strong, the solitude of one who no longer betrays themselves to maintain the proximity of others. And in that space, where once there was confusion, clarity emerges. Where once there was anxiety, peace settles. Where once there was neediness, a new kind of strength arises, the strength of inner wholeness. Carl Jung stated that the process of individuation, of becoming your true self, requires you to distance yourself from the collective, to disidentify from the mask, to walk alone for a time. And that is precisely what you are doing when you decide to become unavailable. You are not fleeing the world. You are returning to yourself. It is at this point that you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You cease to be shaped by circumstances and begin to shape your reality from within. The people who feel uneasy with your absence reveal that they never truly wanted you. They desired the role you played, and now that you no longer fit that role, they are at a loss. And that is liberating. You will lose some people, but you will find yourself. You will distance yourself from certain places, but you will reconnect with your essence. You will be misunderstood by some, but finally, you will begin to be respected because when you are no longer available for just anything, you become valuable, rare, unforgettable. And make no mistake, this is a rebirth, a new beginning, the start of a life where you no longer settle for emotional scraps, for manipulative games, for voids disguised as affection. Now, you only accept what resonates with your peace, with your truth, with your wholeness. And if you have journeyed this far, it is because a part of you is already prepared for this new path. A part of you has already understood that being loved means nothing if it requires abandoning yourself, and that true self-love commences when you choose yourself, even if it necessitates a period of solitude.